Today we're going to go through reports, ranges, filters, merged results and saved settings, which is all about data. Data is the lifeblood of FinPower Connect and of course our software user's business. So naturally we've built in many ways of viewing and exporting data stored within FinPower Connect to enable ease of access and use for our clients to aid them in getting what they need for analysis and to leverage off for reporting requirements typically required by legislative requirements, accounting purposes, and much more. We'll start with our reporting hub, as it were, which is the Report Explorer. The Report Explorer is located in the Report menu, and this is the place you'll find the majority of the reports available in FinPower Connect. What you'll notice as you explore this area is that there are two specific report types that appear consistently throughout FinPower Connect, which are the list reports and the details reports. There are also other sample reports available based on different underlying criteria or purposes or client needs. These reports are really flexible and provide several different ways in which to present the information, which I'll show you as we go through. It's important to remember that standard reports are just samples and that the custom reports can be quoted for and built, should the client's needs require it. But that said, the standard reports are very comprehensive, so it's a good idea to know what is available before jumping straight into a custom option. On that note, we'll have a look at some of the available reports now, and I'll point out some useful tips and tricks along the way. As you can see here, down the left-hand side of the Report Explorer, there are a number of different report classifications, starting with the admin reports. As mentioned, the majority you'll see in this list are list reports and details reports, plus a few extras. List reports are exactly like they sound, and in this context are a report you can run to provide you with a list of records in their applicable admin library. If we have a look at the account type list report, as an example, this report will provide a list of the account type saved and display based on any other filters, ranges, and grouping applied. If we start by looking at our general page for this report, we can see we can choose to order by code or description, or descending if we tick that box, can be further filtered by account type if necessary, and we can choose whether to include inactive account types, show notes, and whether or not the report shows on a separate line. And we can choose what account classes to include. If we go ahead and select all the loan account classes, and we'll tick the show notes box, we can then click preview to view what our printable report would look like based on just this page. You'll notice that we have the column headers up the top and that we've chosen to include based on just the general page options. And down the bottom of the report, we can see what parameters have been included. The preview function can be really handy for checking the layout and what information is being returned before running an export. Using many filters to cut down the results will save on running time, and you'll be able to double check your configuration. From here, we can click the Rerun Report button and amend our configuration. Or we could choose to export from here if we're happy with our report. If we hover over the buttons at the top, it will give you a tooltip explaining all of the functions. For example, save the settings used to produce this report, rerun, export report document, export report data, email report, etc. This is also available in help in the button strip table as shown in the image here. If we hit the rerun button, we return to the account type list report form as shown before, and we can review the other pages involved. On the ranges page for this report, we can choose to select a range of product types if we want to, and on the grouping page we can do a few things. For example, I'm going to choose to group by account class and include a page break after each one. It'll look a little sparse in this database, but it's a useful feature to note. On the printer page, we can also choose the printer, in this case Microsoft Print to PDF. We can choose the orientation, paper size, and we can amend other details as well. We can choose the off color and the margin, the highlight. We can change the scaling, all sorts. Once you've found the formats you like, you can choose to save them as defaults over on the left-hand side under settings, or save them as a specific setting that you can load the next time you open the report. You can also choose whether you want to share those settings with anyone else or just keep them as your own saved settings. If we click on our preview again, we should see the changes. We can see that the title, fonts and line color have all changed. The orientation is now landscape, and we have 4 pages. On our first page, we have a group header of account type list header example, and if we use the buttons up the top, we can navigate to the additional pages. As we can see, the grouping has worked as intended, and if we didn't like the page break, it's really easy to hit that rerun button again, go back to your grouping, click on page break, and it's gone. If we click preview again, you can see that it's now just all on the one page and grouped as we would expect. You can see again down here the parameters that we've used, etc. Again, if we found the format we're after, it's simple to resave the settings. You can save over the top of the one you had before if you've tweaked it. And then it'll appear under the saved settings options to be run again at any stage. For example, here's one I prepared earlier with some different settings. So you can play around with the fonts and the colours to get the look that you're really after for a nice tidy report. The last option available on this report is the data exports page. Here you'll find under the drop-down list several different options that are available for exportable formats. We have the following: Excel workbook, comma separated list known as a CSV file, pipe delimited, tab delimited, query results form, dataset XML, HTML table, an MS Excel XML spreadsheet, as well as direct to PDF. We won't go through each of the formats today, but as always, I encourage you to go through these yourself if you haven't already. As an example of the external FinPower Connect external to FinPower Connect exports, using CSV as an example, you can see that the file name field becomes available, and you can change where the file is set to go and the file name. This is another field where smart tags are available, and by right-clicking so that you can utilize specific folder options, as well as our favorite year, month, day, hour, minute, seconds option to ensure you have a unique file name. The default folder location, unless changed like we've done here, is either your export folder in user preferences or global settings depending on your setup. There are also default ranges and printer settings under reporting under user preferences that you can define, as well as defining a specific reporting database. One of the handy export formats here is the query results form. This is because you can review your results within FinPower Connect prior to then exporting them externally, which means you can further filter them if you wish and add or remove columns. If you're exporting and saving it outside of FinPower Connect, you can store a file name including the usual smart tag headers as mentioned in order to make the file name unique. And it should go straight through to your reporting file folder as mentioned, rather than popping up on your screen. Now the columns to export is an important piece of the reporting puzzle. Here you can typically find many more fields of data that you can export in view than would be included in the standard printed version of the report. For example, if you untick Include all columns in their original order, you can choose to rearrange these in alphabetical order so that you can more easily find what you're looking for. In this case, the list is small, but I will show you an example shortly that has a lot of information that makes this feature really useful. You can then use the arrows to insert over to the other box which columns you'd like to include, or you can simply double click on them. You can use these arrows here to rearrange the order of the columns. If you wanted the notes on top as an example, or the account type ID. And then you can click the export button once you're ready. As you can see here, we have a FinPower Connect standard looking grid, but with a wider viewing area. You can right click on the column header as usual and select column chooser to add back in any of the available columns that you didn't initially run. We also have the ability to show our filter row and filter as may be desired. So in short, you can choose either a custom export, Analyze Excel, which will open in Microsoft Excel from here. Custom export will provide you with all of the normal options previously mentioned. So quite often I'll go to the query results form first and then export further from there. If we then jumped back into Report Explorer and ran a different report, such as the loan overdue report, go to our data export page and select query results form. Take a bunch in here. And then we left this open and went back to the Report Explorer and ran our and did the same thing for our loan interest variance report. We can use a very useful function down the bottom here called merge results. This does exactly what the tooltip suggests. It merges the query results with the query shown on another form. So we select query 1 and then query 2 and how we wish to join these. Typically you'd go with horizontal and join based on a column that is common to both of the queries. If we click finish, you can see here we now have a combined grid linked by account ID, and you can go further and filter and export to your little heart's content. This covers the majority of the basic functions you'll find on a report, with the exception of our little add to queue button, which we'll cover off a little bit later. Standard reports in FinPower Connect. As mentioned, each area has some standard reports of list and detailed reports as well as some other reports, such as under Account, we have the Account Exception List report. This is a really useful sample report that is based around some of the more common exceptions that may occur that clients may wish to highlight and review with actions to be taken. For example, where there is a balance mismatch, where direct debits have stopped, where there are high-cost loan warnings, and accounts with various suspensions. We have a quick preview of that. There's not a lot of data in this database, so we ended up with no results, but it's a really handy report to be able to run. As you can see, as I mentioned previously, all of these pages differ depending on which report you select, so it's a very good idea to take some time to familiarise yourself with what is available reporting-wise out of the box. The account reports here are available across all account classes, whereas there are some other reports that are only available to loans or deposits, which you'll find under their own category. For example, under deposit reports, you can find the deposit weighted interest rate report. And under loan reports, you can see the loan contractual overdue report, amongst others. There's obviously many others, and each with their own purpose and collection of standard columns, filters, ranges, grouping options, and different exportable information. Under Client, you'll see additional reports such as the Client Equity Report and the Client Invalid Address Report. Under Transaction Reports, you'll find many useful reports available, including the Bank Transaction List Report, the Transaction List Report, and so on and so forth. There's also other useful reports, such as the Permissions Usage Report and the Security Statement Exception List Report. There's also the ability to run widget reports in here as well. For custom widgets, you simply define on the script form under the Options page, for example here, whether or not they're available to show in Report Explorer. But you can simply run your widget report right from here. These can also be configured to show automatically in the Task Manager, which we can see here. Mentioning again the two standard reports that are available across everything, the details reports are only available to be run from Report Explorer. However, the list reports are available from most forms within FinPower Connect, like the examples here. If we're on the GL accounts form, you will see under the reports header, there is the option to run the list report. It'll basically open the same form with the same options to be able to filter and export. And it's as easy as that. This is the same when you click on an account. You're also able to access the account list report from any account within FinPower Connect, and so on and so forth. We jump back into some of our bigger reports again, like the client details report. can have another look at some of our filters, ranges, and groupings. So you can see here there's many different options on the general page on the details report for things you may or may not want to include. A whole drop-down list for different log options, and many filters and ranges are available. Quite often the ranges will be by different admin libraries. For example, like client types, you could choose to narrow it down to individuals only, and so on and so forth. I mentioned grouping before. This one is a really big one. As you can see, there is many grouping options available here. It's also another one with a massive amount of ranges and a huge amount of data export column options. So again here, this is where making it alphabetical order becomes really useful, because if you know what you're looking for example, you know you want your account ID and your account name, but you don't want all the other guff in between, but you want your accrued interest, your net interest, all these options. You can just go ahead, go through, double click what you want. So you want your allocations, the original amounts financed, the balances, and so on and so forth. Specific dates, whether or not you want your branch, client ID and client name, possibly not always necessary, but is available. Credit limits, open date, etc., etc. You can rearrange your columns by dragging them, all sorts. So that's how to run the reports in a nutshell. I do also want to cover off running queries within FinPower Connect. So if we go back to our report menu, you can access this fantastic little run query function. You can choose to run a standard report query from here as well, which is all of the reports we just looked at in Report Explorer, or you can choose to run an ad hoc query or load previously saved ad hoc queries. We click Next with ad hoc query in the paste hint. We can include our own query based on or using SQL expressions. Here's a little one I prepared earlier. And in this case, it's going to bring up a list of open accounts in the specified account classes with the 4 columns mentioned of account ID, name, balance, and balance overdue. All going well. Here is where you can choose to save your query. And again, as we mentioned before, you can choose to save it over a previously saved query option, or go for new data store, or to an external file location if desired. And whether you want to share it with a list, share it with everyone, share it with specific roles. In this case, I'll just go with everyone and click Save. Once we click Finish, our query will run, and it automatically comes straight into the query result form option. And as you can see, as advertised, oops, didn't mean to reorder those. We've got our 4 columns with a list, with our balance, account ID, name, etc. Now if we go back to this menu and run a secondary query, this time I'm going to select our loan aged overdue report. That's right here. Can't see for looking. Specify some parameters for the standard queries. That'll be fine for us. Filters, parameters. Let's remove a few columns. Finish that. And now we can use our fun little merge function again. Click finish and voila! We have our joint merged query, which again can then be filtered. Other columns cannot be added in once you've merged them, so that's something to be aware of, but you can further filter from there and of course export to Excel or any other chosen format from here. Moving on to report queues. Which you can find here on the reports form as well. On the button strip here on a previewed report. And under the report menu, when you have a report open, you can also click to add to a queue, which will open the add report to queue wizard. You can choose to add it to an existing queue, like our monthly one, and follow through the wizard, determining what you want it to include, and click finish. That'll then open the queue itself, and you can go through and tweak that further. Now these queues are another admin library, so you can access them by going to admin and queues. And they're really fantastic for setting up a list of reports that will run in a group. For example, you may have a daily list or a monthly list that you can run 5, 6 or 52, whatever is relevant, all in one go. Whatever happens is determined by your queue settings. So if you set to preview, they'll all open to your screen, and if not, they'll save to their pre-specified location. This is also something that's often set to run automatically via a custom general script or the newer Task Scheduler Cloud functionality. As mentioned, you can set up a new queue by clicking the aforementioned Add to Queue button, or by going to this admin menu and going into Queues. On the Queues form, as already mentioned, it's really simple to follow through and set some preferences for what you'd like your queue to do. For example, whether or not it appears in Report Explorer, setting the defaults, which chooses whether you want to preview the reports, whether you want to email copies of the reports, saving to specific folders, modifying the list of reports and their preset parameters, etc. So on this monthly list, we've got just the 2. We don't have any other defaults set apart from preview. You can choose to minimize those previews while the report is running, and close the preview form after this report is run. So that's something to keep in mind if you're setting them run as to run as a scheduled task, that you probably want to make sure they close after the report is run so FinPower Connect can shut back down again. And choosing whether or not they need to go to specific folders like a monthly report folder rather than just your generalized export folders, and the email exported item files. Choose to send this to myself as an example. templates as at parameters. There can be a lot of scripting in here if you need it to do specific things, which is not something I will cover today. Again, script constants if they're applicable. And then you can simply run your queue. Let's see what happens here. So both of those reports have run really quickly and opened as previews on the screen based on my settings. And I should also receive an email with those attached as well. So whether your client wants to just run queues manually from the Report Explorer itself, down here, there's a whole queues section, if you've chosen to display them here, that is. You can go ahead and run it from there, or whether it's done automatically via a task scheduler, whatever works best for them. Moving on to report templates. Another admin library and a really useful feature within FinPower Connect is our report templates. Sometimes reports are required that are not included as the standard FinPower Connect suite of reports and often involve custom scripting. As a result, this is just a simple overview of the report templates form itself from the UI perspective, and the code support team can advise on the code-specific items around this. By using the report templates form, you can design custom reports to run from the Report Explorer exactly as you would create a standard report. For example, using similar layouts and making a pretty printable report. As a base, you can use the standard reports within FinPower Connect, which is really useful if they're just wanting to run some tweaks or add in some additions to an existing base type report. Again, the additions would need to be coded. You can hide the built-in report so it overrides it. You can add additional SQL expression queries to run in here, if you know what you're doing. I do not. Add any specific parameters. Here is the layout where you can go through and confirm the column IDs and what you want it to look like within here. Again, the script code page, which is outside my area of expertise. Constants, permissions, and so on and so forth. Before using the report templates, there are things to consider before quoting. And these are, what does the base report use in terms of dates? As a lot of work goes into changing the core way the report works. So date range versus date as an example. Is this the best format going forward, or is a widget going to be better? And what columns do they need? How are they wanting the report to display, etc. Other reports. Our final topic for today is the additional reports that don't appear where you'd expect them to in Report Explorer. So these ad hoc reports that have been added in for use that are separate to the day-to-day standard reports. So as an example of what I mean by this, if we go to our Tools menu to Utilities, you can see here we've got something called a Script Compilation Errors Report. This one's really useful as it'll pop up with any outdated objects and things. Really useful for your coding people to see where there might be some issues throughout the database. Also in that list, there's a built-in HTML widget and smart list compilation errors report. We'll have to wait for this to finish running, but under Tools User Security, we have a report called the Configuration Security Report, as well as a PCI DSS compliance report. All very useful tools for the right user, but not something your standard end user is going to need, hence why they're under their own specific menus. We have the HTML widget reports and Task Manager is already shown, and event-specific reports. So, for example, bank important exports, there's an opportunity to generate a report at the end of that. Good. Okay, our script compilation errors report has produced. As you can see, it produces a pretty HTML summary with icons and information here. So it talks about obsoleted functions and all sorts of other code related things. And it also produces an query results form, which can of course then be exported, filtered, and so on and so forth. Apologies for jumping around, but just moving back to the user security ones I mentioned, here are the configuration security report and the PCI DSS compliance report. Now the bank import option I was talking about. Let me just grab a sample report. If I can find where I put them. Let's try another one. Apologies. Anyway, once you get into the imported, the actual import wizard, and you're finished importing and everything, it will pop up asking if you'd like to produce a list of that. Same thing if we do a lodgement. We create a new lodgement. You can choose to print the lodgement schedule, but there is also okay, we don't have it available here at the moment, which isn't very useful. But it would also produce a report. Apologies, the last two examples weren't overly good. I thought I had some examples ready, but clearly not. We've come to the end of our session today, but as always, if there is any additional information you seek, please don't hesitate to contact the application support team for user interface queries or code support in relation to code-specific questions. In our next session, our lovely code team will be running the show with some exciting content, I'm sure.